Okay, my quilt is 67.5 inches wide, so this would fit within borders. I don't think we'd really have a problem with stitching 67.5 inches and having it coming out to the seam where I really want it, or within a few stitches. But let's say this was pretty wide, and we had a thick batting in there, and we knew that the quilting was going to really move the fabric and eat it up, and we weren't really sure if that last stitch was going to end up even close to the seam that we want to hit. So what I like to do is I'm going to go ahead and accept this. It's going to be continuous because at this point all we don't have any edges to even worry about. But what I like to do next is I split out the first and second row, and to do that I'm going to go edit the pattern. I'm going to split the pattern. I'm going to zoom in, and I treat this like I would do a border. You know how sometimes when we quilt borders and we don't quilt them all the way across, even when we're doing line patterns? I'm sure there's a few videos out there that show that example. But what we do is we quilt almost to the end, or however dense it is, we can either split it at the last repeat, which is right here. If I split, remember I said these are full repeats now. So if I split that right at the last repeat, pan over so you can see, we've got one full repeat there. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to split the first and second row, the last repeats out of the first and second row. So that's split. I'm going to do the same thing to the next one. Let me go up to the next one and split the next one. Split. Okay, I'm finished. When I go to sew this, the reason I do that is so that I can sew this first section first and see what happens. Then I take my machine. After this first section is sewn, I look and see how much I have left to quilt, how many inches I have left empty between the last stitch of this first pattern. Hang on a minute, let me go ahead and get through the sew quilt. Okay, if I'm going to sew this, there it is. If I sew this area right here first, that will leave this last area empty. And I will take my machine and I will measure this last area out manually using my machine after this section has quilted. That way, if the fabric's going to move, or that seam that's over here on the side that we're trying to hit, if that has moved, we have this area here, this next area, that we're going to adjust to fit in that block perfectly. So I would sew this first, continue. Then I would sew that. And this is sort of on demo, so I can only show you so much. I can't really, start the sewing, blah, blah, blah. It's sewing, that first section. Let me back up. Okay, now we're going to select the next pattern. Now when I'm getting to the next area, this first section has already sewn. Now when I get to this area, this is the section I'm working on. Now I can either sew that like it is. I would measure across, use my machine to make sure that that's going to fit in where I need it. Or I would go back and I would change, edit the pattern, modify this pattern, modify this right here, and change the width to where I need it. So let's say right now it's 14.3. I can't even see that. It's 73, I think. I would just change the width up, or stretch it, and move it around and manipulate this last section, kind of like you would do a border. Manipulate this last section so that you can fit that in the last block, or the last section. By doing it this way, we get really, really close to that edge. It just takes a little extra time to split that out. The reason I do the first and second row, many of us only use 1 or 2 rows to quilt with. We go all the way down the quilt, realigning to the first row, and sewing the second row. So we're really sewing the second row over and over again. So after I sew this first row, then I will be working with the second row, and just doing the same thing. I will sew this part across, and then each time I come to the end of that, I will just measure that and change that part. I'm at the point where I can modify that any way I want. I hope that makes sense. As I'm quilting down, let me go to full zoom. As I'm quilting down my rows, like I said, I only go 1 and 2, 1 and 2. That's kind of how I quilt things. But as I get down to the bottom,